electricity in Sahara and then ship it across to Europe. I mean, my idea is that one should first start to supply some of the Moroccans and Algerians with electricity from that before they send it on. But I mean, that's sort of politics which go into these things. But just to say that on this question of distribution, we may have opportunities to distribute electricity on much longer distance in the future than we have been used to.
Is that what you mean if you talk about intelligent grids?
No, that's not so much. No, intelligent grid is rather that you use electricity where and when. I mean, this is about logistics, but logistics for electrons, not for food or material and so on.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's quite clear that an electricity sector with fluctuating production, which you can't do much about, I mean, which comes as the wind blows, will put up much bigger demands on how you use and distribute and exchange and store the electricity.
Yeah, talking about storage, I mean, that might be an important topic as well. I mean, linked to wind energy and stuff like that. Storage.
Yeah. I mean, I've said a bit, most of these storage types, like pump storage, you can pump water up and then take it down through a turbine as hydropower afterwards, or you can compress air and expand it and use the energy that is in the compressed air, or you can turn electricity into hydrogen. Most of these storage processes have quite big conversion losses, and I would basically say that they should only be used as the last fallback position, because to the extent that you can make proper use, I mean less loss dominating use of your energy one way or the other, that is generally a better way of doing it. And to give you one example, I mean, if you have a district heating system like we have in Denmark, it's relatively easy to build a different type of storage. You simply have hot water in your district heating system, and you put in a big pool in the system somewhere, and you heat the water when you have excess electricity, and then you use it for the heating when the wind doesn't blow. And there you can actually do storage of heat without conversion losses, and no conversion loss in it, and you can store heat for weeks or maybe even months. So you can actually have heat that cuts over, energy that cuts over from periods with much wind to the next period with not wind through periods with little wind. But then again, you come out in a vast number of different technologies that will apply. If you don't have a district heating system, you don't have this opportunity, and it's not likely that people will introduce district heating for that purpose. So it's sort of a derived benefit from the system you have. But there are quite a number of industries that could use these things as well.
Yeah, the last topic we have on that level is use, and I guess things are moving towards electricity.
In this country as well, and I would say basically in most cases where you move out of fossil fuels, whether you go, even biomass will probably give rise to quite a lot of electricity generation, that you will see more electricity and less direct fuel use in the different sectors. And one of the big challenges at this point is to see to which extent we can get electricity into the transport sector, electric vehicles, which is not an easy kind of task, because batteries are expensive and heavy and don't allow you to go more than 150 kilometers before either changing the battery or recharging it, and recharging takes time and so on. So the transport sector is in a way the big challenge in all this new energy system, and particularly electricity. On the other hand, one shouldn't ignore that if you don't insist on exchanging all the oil over a fortnight, I mean, there are many places you could start take something like distribution of goods to supermarkets, the trucks. A long-distance truck can't run on electricity because it would have to stop far too frequently, and that wouldn't work. But these trucks that distribute goods to supermarkets, they stand still most of the time. They don't use that much fuel. So and they go back to the same place every day, so they could easily have a place where you shift or recharge the batteries and things like that. So if you really want to get electricity into the transport sector, you have to be aware of which particular parts are the best candidates. Of course, trains is an obvious candidate. Put more also goods transport on trains. And then some people have been more creative and thought of certain ways that you could have long-distance truck running on sort of a type of electricity line either up there or on the ground, which of course is a bit into the future. I don't dare to say to which extent these things will see the light of the day in 20 years' time. It could be, but...
The last question about the global power play on energy. We have the US and Europe and the Middle East, and then we have the Chinese. I mean, how do you see China's role in?
Well, I don't have any particular crystal ball. I mean, the Chinese are insisting that they want to have access to the global energy resources the same way as anybody else. The Chinese are not particularly confident they will get that without moving in some of the places where the oil lies, mainly an oil game. China doesn't use much gas, but they are picking up smaller quantities from Australia and so on now. It's an oil game. I think that it's important to know that even though the increase in oil consumption that we expect over the coming years is very much associated with China, China still has a much lower oil consumption per capita than has particularly the US, but even Europe. China consumes 10 million barrels per day. They used to be down 5 or 6, but they have grown quite a lot. But 10 million barrels per day in China versus 20 million barrels per day in the US and 13, 14 million barrels per day in Europe. But when you take into account that there are 4 times as many Chinese as Americans, so they only use around 10-12% of an American per capita. So I think it's very, very difficult to go and tell the Chinese that they should hold back on their oil consumption. But nevertheless, this is happening. So I think there's far too much China bashing going on. So I would be very hesitant to. I would say if we want to do something about the global politics of energy, we who have the high consumption per capita, that is particularly the US that has a high, but Europe has a high as well, not quite as high. And by the way, the Middle East have very high oil consumption per capita, but they will not. You can't reach them in that sort of a dialogue. But at least Europe, Japan, US.
How many percent?
In the Middle East, oh gosh. Well, it's actually quite a lot. I would say that on a per capita basis in the Middle East they use more than Europe. They are probably at the American level. Of course, they're only Saudi Arabia is 20 million and the rest is another 10 million, so it's only 10% of the US population. But I mean, they use oil as if it were for free. So Russia, by the way, has also quite a good oil consumption. But still, I mean, there are, 150, 140 million people, whereas the Middle East, that part of the Middle East, the Arabian countries are 30 million people. 20 in Saudi Arabia, 3 in the Emirates, 3 in Oman, 2 in Kuwait, and so on. So it's small numbers, but high consumption.
So it might be suitable to have a very final question, which is one that you cannot answer, Jørgen. You know, the power play between non-renewable and renewable in 2050, do you think the business case behind renewable energy is so good that we will see the shift and we will have more or less 100%?
Well, climate change will sort of drive us to do more about fossil fuels than would be needed from a strictly security of supply point of view. If we are to respect the 2 degrees centigrade maximum temperature increase, we can't allow ourselves to use all the fossil fuels. Now, some could be done by carbon sequestration. You could say if you could use it with putting the CO2 into the ground. But we can use all the oil, in fact, within that scenario. So therefore, the power game, in my view, will be on oil rather than on fossil fuels as such. And also because oil has this crucial role in transport, where it's very difficult to replace, but where all the different uses of gas and coal in electricity industry and what have you is relatively easy to replace with other uses. So I would say if you look for problems in the oil sector, it's oil first, it's oil second, it's oil third. For different reasons.
Well, I guess you can see that I didn't promise too much, that Jørgen knows a lot about energy. So I think we should give him a hand.
Sorry?
You should be our energy minister.
Oh, no.
No thanks?
No, a minister who knows too much about this subject always turns out to end as a disaster.